Are you ready?
I'm always ready, sir.
Okay, just check. I call this meeting the Williamsburg James City County School Board to order. Ms. Surza, could you take the roll?
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Mrs. Bradesco.
Here.
Ms. Emanuel.
Here.
Mr. Cortez.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here.
Mr. Nichols.
Here.
Mr. Keller.
Here. Chairman Hippel?
Call the meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors. Mr. Hill, would you call it?
Yes, sir. Ms. Jones.
Here.
Mr. McGlennon.
Here.
Mr. Onizuk.
Here.
Mr. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Hippel.
Here.
Mayor Holman?
I'd like to call the March 11th special meeting of the Williamsburg City Council to order. Ms. Miller, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Newton.
Here.
Mr. Pond.
Here.
Mayor Holman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Filey.
Here.
Mr. Foster.
Here.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy schedules to get here today. I know everyone here is extremely busy, and it's always a challenge to put this date on the calendar. I look forward to bringing you up to speed on where the school is, not only in performance, but also with our budget. So with that, first item on the agenda is the First Division Performance Update. Dr. Constantino?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking your time to come and talk about the school division. We very much appreciate your time, and we will try to be mindful and respectful of it. Our presentation today runs along similar lines as it has in the past in terms of giving you a snapshot of division performance, an overview of our successes and our continuing challenges. But I would be remiss if I didn't start by thanking you for your support and your encouragement and your interest in the Williamsburg James City County Schools. I think that as I look back over the last 4 years, I arrived here in the middle of one of the most difficult financial situations our country has seen. And since 2011, since my arrival, I have had nothing but praise and success for coming together, working together, and figuring a way forward. And as I told the school board, and I have told our staff, that while things are better, certainly we are not out of the woods in terms of the economy of the country, and certainly the economy of Virginia, with some of the specifics that have affected this state that may not have affected others. But we appreciate that spirit of cooperation. We appreciate your support. You have always risen to the challenge. You continue to deliver support for the needs of 11,131 students and growing. We appreciate that. We appreciate the support in terms of the middle school and space needs for the school division. And I just want to make sure that you and the public know that we don't take that for granted, and we don't take that lightly at all. I think it's important, and I think the spirit of cooperation is what sets us apart. And we can stand and say, not only are we a premier community, but we have a premier school system, and we're able to have good, constructive conversations about how to move forward. And that's much appreciated. What I'd like to try to accomplish in a reasonably short period of time is to share with you a little bit about where we are, a little bit about where we need to go, and some ideas on how we propose to get there. We will tie our information that we give you about performance, tie some of that to the budget later on as we talk more specifically about the categorical needs that we have presented in the budget, and hopefully make some connections for you in terms of where we are and where we hope to go. So it starts really with something that the school board insisted upon when I arrived 4 years ago, and that was, first of all, we need a very clear vision as to who we are, where we're going, and what we need to accomplish. And the vision statement of pursuing excellence and championing the success of all students is a statement that really is important, because I think the most important word in that statement is the word all, not some, not what's convenient to us or what we can afford, but championing the needs of all of our kids. And we're going to talk a little bit about how our school system and our community is changing, and perhaps some of the things that we need to do to respond to that change. The school board also put together a very distinctive, very precise strategic plan. There are measurable outcomes, all of which are posted publicly each year. The accountability factor in terms of our key performance indicators All of those ideas are championed in the strategic processes that we have, and it has provided me with a very clear roadmap of the school board's vision for excellence for the school system. And I'm very proud to say that we'll talk about a lot of things that we have accomplished and those things that are yet to be accomplished. I'm always reminded of a statement that is in a famous book. I'm sure you know the book, but if I give you the statement, but the statement says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." I'm sure you can figure out what book that is. The reason I share that with you is because one of the things that I am most proud of is that the school board has articulated a very clear vision of where our school division is going. And it does a very good job of ensuring to hold our staff accountable that we are meeting the desires and the results of the strategic plan, and when we don't, do we need to take another route? Do we need to look at something differently? So this idea of continuous improvement, this idea of mid-course corrections, is essential, I think, to the ongoing development and the ongoing success of the school system. It wouldn't be a good school district presentation without starting to talk about enrollments. I thought it might be helpful to look at where we have been enrollment-wise, starting in 2005 and going all the way to a projection for 2015-16. You will note that in that 10-year period, we have consistently increased our student enrollments, even through the recession. And as you've heard us talk about before, we're one of the few school divisions that continued to grow through the recession. Many school districts flatlined, some school districts lost students. We did not. We continued to grow fairly significantly, I would say, given the financial situation that the country has been in this past few years. It represents approximately 1,300 student growth in 10 years. And if we project that growth out, we'll talk about that in a minute. We have been successful in being within about 1 to 2% accurate every year in our projections. And so we're pretty comfortable that we've got the enrollment figured out in terms of the projections that we have to make. Let's take a look at those projections. This is something that we shared with the school board when we presented the budget to them. If you look at this chart, I think it's very telling. One, the blue lines are where we are today. That's enrollment as of September 2014. The green lines are the projections of where we're going to be in about 5 years. And every one of those categories is increased over where we are. Most specifically, I would draw your attention to what I think are significant increases projected in 3rd and 4th grade and significant increases in the high school. 3rd and 4th grade, of course, becomes middle school students. So if our accuracy in the past 10 years maintains itself over the next 10 years, we will experience continued enrollment growth. The variance, again, from our projections to actual numbers has been somewhere in the 1 to 2% range, pretty close, and consistently pretty close over the years. But there's another story that I'd like to share with you, and this gets into a little bit about how things have changed. Since 2009, our socioeconomic status, meaning students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, has risen by about 9%. The number that you see on the screen, 31%, is last year's figure. This year's figure is in. The new number is 34%. So we see a pretty steady increase in socioeconomically disadvantaged students. With that, we have seen an increase in students for whom English is not a first language. Since 2009, the number of students who come to us with English as a second language has doubled. And then the third category, of course, is the special needs population, special education population. When you add all three of those categories together, we now have 51% of our school system in a category of need. Those needs are different, but we understand that when we have students in subgroups and in categories of need, the kinds of programs that we must offer what we need to do to help all those students be successful. If we're going to be true to the vision that we have in our school system, all means all, then we have to find ways to help students who struggle in school. And I think it's important for not only our governing bodies, but for our community to understand that we have a very successful school system. We also have a school system that's changing, and will continue to change. I have invited people to visit the United States Census Bureau page and look at the United States Census Bureau projections for Hampton Roads in Virginia in terms of population shifts, changes, and growth. I think there's a lot of information there, and we see in our growth and in the categories of our growth pretty much a mirroring of what has been predicted by the census for many, many years. We have a very simple idea, and we believe that all children can learn. Socioeconomically disadvantaged doesn't mean you cannot learn. A student with special needs doesn't mean that you cannot learn. What it means is that you learn differently, that you need different materials, that you might need different structures, that you need different environments. And all of those things are needed for these children. And so my purpose this morning in sharing this this afternoon, and sharing this with you is to kind of bring into context, because we can talk about total enrollments, and that's fine. But I think when we start getting down into the specifics of those enrollments, where our students are coming from and what kind of students are coming to us, and what kind of programs we are going to have in place in order to meet those challenges, it starts to draw, I hope it starts to draw a path toward the budget recommendations that we've made to the school board. One of the things that we have been adamant about doing, hopefully, is to look at our student achievement data, look at where our students are performing, where our students may have some issues, and find ways in which we can support those students with the resources that our teachers and our schools indicate that they need to help those students. I want to share with you now something that we shared with the school board and give you a little context before we do. One of the things that we are hopefully doing a better job of, and we'll always welcome your feedback, is trying to put data into context and trying to tell our story in terms of what it takes for our school division to be as successful as it is. We can stand up here and show you bar graphs, and that might resonate with you, that might not resonate with you. So we've put together something that we shared with the school board. We've decided to go ahead and share it with you. I apologize to the school board. This will be their second or third viewing of it. But this is a video that talks about the instructional program and gives you the data, but also gives you the context of what's happening specifically in schools and classroom to get us where we need to get to. So it's just a few minutes long.
Achievement in WJCC schools is much more than just standardized exams. We're looking at the entire children's school experience. As part of preparing students for life after WJCC, we're focusing on 21st century skills such as career and technical education. For example, we're providing more opportunities for students to have a variety of experiences that go beyond the classroom, so that when they leave us, they're prepared to take any path they choose. When the state changes SOL exams, there's usually a significant drop in test scores. We saw such a drop in math scores at both the state level and WJCC. We are beginning to see a rebound locally of our scores as a result of the teachers' work in the classrooms. They've been working on high-yield instructional strategies, engaging students in their own learning, and providing feedback along the way. And we're going to continue doing this so that we will constantly reinforce the skills that students need to have higher level thinking and be able to adjust as the SOL tests change.
when you're using high-yield instructional strategies and you're very intentional about the instruction and the way that you're sharing content with students, there is always higher student performance. The more collaborative groups, the more choice, the more authentic problem solving, the more authentic products that they create, the more that you can do those kinds of tasks, the more successful that students will be.
Presenter, please hold your board up. Beautiful's team, which number did you put first?
We put 3 and 7 10.
Thumbs up if you support them.
In the lesson that I taught today, I was modeling a few strategies. I was modeling problem solving and I was modeling collaborative groups. So I easily could have given the students the algorithm from the start. Here's the graph paper, line up the decimals, add zeros, order the decimals. Instead, I chose to start with a math talk to give them opportunities to engage with one another and apply some critical thinking skills to the problem. So by scaffolding it in that way, I think it was authentic problem solving because they couldn't use the same strategy every time. They had to tweak it just a little bit for a little bit more rigorous problem each time. And so I think both of those strategies combined were much more powerful than if I had just taught the algorithm from the start, because they discovered the algorithm throughout the lesson.
Federal No Child Left Behind requires states to establish annual measurable objectives, or AMOs, for raising reading and mathematics achievement overall, as well as for students in subgroups. Separate benchmarks have been set for 3 proficiency gap groups of students who historically have underperformed or not met the Commonwealth standards, as well as 6 subgroups that are measured separately.
When a student comes to WJCC that's an English language learner, the first thing that we do is assess their level of proficiency. And once we determine what level they're on, levels 1 through 6, then we can determine a plan of action.
This is a radio. Very good. Now,
ELL students that are expected to take an SOL test pose some very distinct challenges because of their limited language proficiency. Some of the work that we do with them includes one-to-one instruction with their ESL teacher. We also provide accommodations for them while taking tests. We work with the classroom teachers to provide students with a variety of both test-taking and instructional strategies, and we tried multiple approaches to ensure that students are successful even if they have limited language proficiency. The goal is for students to demonstrate what they know and not be impeded by their English language development. Similar to our English language learners, our economically disadvantaged students may come to us with learning gaps. Our focus on good instruction and identification of individual learner needs helps our teachers employ instructional strategies so that all students achieve.
In WJCC, one instructional strategy that we use for a large percentage of our students with special needs is the collaborative model, where we have a special education teacher working in conjunction with a general education teacher in a classroom on a daily basis. This has a lot of benefits for both general education and special education students. You have 2 teachers with different types of expertise in the classroom. The general education teacher provides the content knowledge and the expertise in the content. The special education teacher is able to provide a variety of instructional strategies to differentiate the learning opportunities for students. And we have found that to be a successful model for a large number of our students with special needs. In Williamsburg, James City County, student achievement for our students with special needs mirrors the challenges of that in the nation. We have students that have a variety of needs, and we work to address those through differentiating the strategies that we use. An area of focus for special education this year has been restructuring how we're utilizing our instructional specialists in order to really create a classroom level focus on providing feedback to teachers regarding the different instructional strategies. The result of this is to build consistency in the progress that we're seeing in our students. And we are seeing strides in that area as far as progress in reading and math.
The staff at James River took a laser-like focus on student instruction. One of the things that they did was determine what strategies they needed to put in place to ensure that students were learning and develop a plan for how they were going to respond when students did not learn. The changes made at James River started with embracing the philosophy that we're going to start where we are, use what we have, and do what we can. And we would not have made the changes that we made if everybody was not as bothered by the fact that student performance was not reflective of how hard teachers work and what students are truly capable of. We also had to embrace the philosophy that student success needed to boil down to more than just what the score said in May. We took every opportunity to celebrate student success.
This is actually reading a short little passage and trying to decide which is. So for example,
every week, twice a week, Tuesdays for math and Fridays for reading, we will sit down with grade level teams, talk about what we were going to be teaching kids, and being able to ask the question, how do we know students are learning each and every day?
As we focus on the 21st century needs of students, our strategic plan defines our goals and gives us direction in our quest to provide opportunities for success for all students.
There was a time in education, perhaps when most of us were in school, where we went to school and the teacher was the sole source of knowledge. Everything you learned from the teacher. Consider for a moment today where the teacher is no longer the sole source of knowledge. She now shares that with the internet, Siri, Google, and all of those things are a minute away, a keypad stroke away for any student. So the role of teachers has become incredibly important in education, and that's something that we don't take lightly. And we understand that above all else, a quality workforce is essential to move us forward. We can have a great plan, we can have great materials, we can have great programs, and we can have great ideas. If we don't have the quality of the workforce to pull that off, the rest of it probably isn't going to work the way we want to. So we have invested heavily in professional development for teachers. We understand the role of the teacher is changing to a facilitator of knowledge. Knowledge itself is changing. Some researchers are saying that we are now in the knowledge age, where knowledge has become a commodity. Knowledge is now capital. And we see businesses, startup businesses, and a lot of the economy where groups of people are getting together to share that knowledge, and that knowledge turns into a viable commodity for businesses. So I want to, that video highlights our successes and our challenges, and I wanted to go just a little bit deeper with you, again, understanding that we have a finite amount of time, but I also think you hopefully might be interested in this. If not at the moment, you'll have some time later on to digest it. You should have a black folder somewhere near you, I hope. If you don't, let us know. If you will look on the right-hand side of that folder, again, you're going to see a sheet of paper that's folded over. It's a longer, a legal-sized piece of paper. The front of it, and I will admit that both sides look a lot alike, but if you'll look at this Up in the left-hand corner, it says 5 school divisions in the state share demographics that are similar enough to compare to student achievement. One of the things that we have wanted and desired to do for the last few years, when we compare ourselves to the state, we're always going to soar above state averages because we are an above-average school district. And I hope that that very notion is something that we can all celebrate. So it became important to us to understand, well, how do we compare with people who are like us? Can we find school divisions that are similar in nature to our size, our demographics, our programs? And is there anything that we can learn? Is there anything that we can do? If we see school systems like us that are having successes where we are not, can we go and find out? Can we learn things and bring them back to our division? So you'll see in the upper left-hand corner there is a key for the school divisions that we are comparing ourselves to, along with the state, which is the dark blue. If you read the cross to the right, like school division demographics, you will see the number of physical schools in the district, the number of students as reported by their fall membership in the state, and then the third column, the third row underneath that is the percentage of economically disadvantaged students. And you'll see that there's a wide variety in the schools in terms of the kinds of kids we are serving. We're toward the higher end of socioeconomically disadvantaged, and some schools don't have the same disadvantaged population that we do. But it was interesting to us to start to look at it and to start to see where we stacked up. If you keep going right, you will see a comparison of students with disability and limited English proficient. You will see that of the schools that we are comparing ourselves to, we have the highest percentages in both of those categories. We have the highest percentages of special needs students. We have the highest percentages of limited English proficient, in some cases significantly higher than some of the school districts that we are comparing ourselves to. Now if you'll go back to the left, to the bottom, what we've tried to do is say, okay, given that information, where do we stack up? And I'm very pleased to say that with minor exception, we're pretty much leading the pack or we're in second place. The red boxes, the red line graph that you see is Williamsburg, James City County. The blue boxes you see are the state comparison, and then we have all other school divisions. When we were able, we've gotten sophisticated enough with data collection where we're now able to drill down and take a close look at our performance compared to those that are like us. We certainly, Fairfax County with 185,000 students, I'm not so sure that that comparison would be accurate. But these are the closest school divisions in Virginia to Williamsburg, James City County. And you'll see on the front and then again on the back, it goes topic by topic. You'll see something else that I hope that you can take great pride in, because we do as well, that we're near the top, at the top or near the top. But there are some glaring differences. One of them is the English language learning population. We have to do a better job. We are not where we want to be. We've already reached out to some schools that are having more success than we are. But we also have to remember we have to balance our need for improvement with the fact that our numbers are increasing a bit more rapidly than other school divisions. That's not an excuse, but that's something that we have to factor into. Why are we where we are? And you'll see reflected in the budget the needs of English. You'll hear when education is full of acronyms, and I apologize, and you stop me, ELL, English language learners. So you'll see monies devoted to more support for students that come to us with English as not a first language. On the back of that piece of paper, the comparison continues in all of the, and this is all reported by the state. This is just our way of kind of putting it together for our use. And then over on the left-hand side, just kind of a review of all of the things that we are doing to maintain the success that we have and to bring about the successes that we need with regard to some of the subgroups of our students. We are at or near the top in terms of special needs students. You'll see that every school system, and you heard in the video, And you'll see, as it bears out in the data, every school system across the country struggles with special needs students. We are no different, but we are doing a great job. And some school systems have called us to ask us, what is it that you're doing? How are you having more success? And so this has been a really, for me personally, it's been a good study as a CEO trying to figure out where we go next. This is really good information for us to have, and I think it's good information for you to have as well, because you can see our successes, you can see our challenges, but there's a lot to be proud of, and there's a lot to hang our hat on in terms of what we're trying to do. Let me now continue and talk specifically about the staffing, and we're going to kind of slip into the budget, and I'll ask Christina to help me here in a few minutes. Every year that I have had the privilege of being your superintendent, I have tried to drive the budget with the data in the school system. Where are our students performing? Where are our teachers performing? What do we need? And how does the budget reflect the strategic plan? And how does the budget reflect the data? So you'll see, for example, our commitment to class size. In order to maintain the same class sizes, we're going to increase the number of classroom teachers. We are bringing in more limited English proficient staff, and we are creating a newcomers academy. One of the areas that is most challenging to us is when older students come to us and don't speak English, because we often remember now that the Commonwealth of Virginia gives us a finite amount of time and then has an expectation that all of these groups of students will perform adequately on the standards of learning tests. So our goal is to try to make sure that all of our students are successful. When older students come to us, we often find that, one, they have perhaps been away from any type of school for a while, and sometimes they come to us not literate in their own language. And so the staff has gotten together, and those students are expected to not only assimilate into the culture and assimilate into the language, but in a relatively short period of time, demonstrate mastery and demonstrate performance on state tests. So this Newcomers Academy and the monies are addressing that area where clearly we have to improve our performance. We also understand, and I think you've heard me talk about this before, and I'll probably continue talking about it, literacy and reading is a gateway. It's a gateway to success. And another area of concern for us is the reading levels of special needs students. We need to improve that process, so we are bringing in a program that is specifically for special needs students. And we're also improving our staffing with regard to K-8 literacy. All of these things, these initial things, are a direct result of looking at the data, disaggregating that data, and understanding if we have this bag of money, where is it going to be best spent? Where are we going to see the best results in terms of helping all of our students be successful? One more thing, and then Christina will kind of make her way up here. The operating expenditures by function, I wanted to share this with you because the state requires every school division to ensure that it spends 65% of its monies on instruction. And I'm very pleased to once again stand up in front of you and say we spend a lot more than that on instruction. And so I thought these categories, these expenditures by function might help paint a better picture of when we get our monies, where those monies go. And we continue to pump as much of that money as we can into the instructional needs of kids, especially the kids that we've talked about that you've seen today. Christina Berta is our new CFO. She arrived here officially January 1st, unofficially about a week before the holidays. And she had a very small task, and that was to create the superintendent's budget in about a week. I'm very pleased to say that after her first 2 weeks, she stayed, and she's still with us and has already demonstrated really excellence in our finance department. So I'm going to ask her to take you through some of the specifics of the budget. I'm going to come back and make some final comments, and certainly we can have a discussion and direct anything, any kinds of conversation that you want. So, Christina.
Dr. Constantine, before you get into that, I just have a little administrative action I need to take care of real
Yep.
quick. As you might imagine, and probably everybody here is aware, there's been some changes to the statute this year which will require disclosure of potential conflicts before discussion of certain items which come before an elected body. Therefore, one of those things is our budget. So therefore, I just wanted to say that my wife is an employee of the school system. However, I am able to participate in consideration of and vote on the budget fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. So.
Yeah, likewise, my wife is an employee of the school division, and I am able to participate in the consideration and vote of the budget fairly, objectively, and in the interest of the public.
I'm employed by the Williamsburg Health Foundation, which makes a grant to the school system. However, I believe I am also able to participate in consideration of this budget fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just a little bit of administration action I take care of because the General Assembly made some changes as we might imagine they would. So, Mrs. Berta?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Constantino. Really quickly, I want to walk you through, Dr. Constantino spoke a little bit about where we spend the majority of our money. And how did you make this clicker work? Oh, there we go. As you can see, this is a display of how we spend our money, and the majority of our funding is spent on people. You can see in wages and fringe benefits, we spend 87.42% of our budget on salaries and benefits for our employees. So the majority of our spending is in people. Then a little bit of how we got to this point. We went through and found efficiencies and ways that we could save some money to make those educational needs happen within the division. So the first thing that we took a look at is how we could improve our processes, as well as to look at our projected attrition savings. And with that, we forecast that we can save $1.2 million. We also did a 5-year analysis on our electricity and fuel budgets. And based on the trend that has happened over the last 5 years, we are comfortable that we can reduce those line items by $250,000 to achieve some of those instructional needs. The VRS changed, the General Assembly changed the VRS rate for employers this year as a one-time item. I don't think that it'll hold true as we go through future budgets, but we currently pay 14.5% towards employee retirement. That rate was reduced to 14.07% in the projections, and actually it came through at 14.06 in the finalized budget. So as we roll into the March 24th presentation to the school board, we will take those decreases into consideration. Also, we're proposing some modifications to our health insurance plans, which will achieve $600,000 in savings as we go through the budget process. Some of the increases that we're looking at, we are proposing a step increase for teachers, most teachers. Those teachers that are at the top of the pay scale will be frozen. There's nowhere to send them into the step. Additionally, in that look at the budget, the step increases do equate to 2.5%. So we are proposing in the budget that we will give a 2.5% salary increase to support and admin staff as well, because they don't have a salary scale with steps. The health insurance rate did increase by 13%. This is $1.3 million if we propose the proposed $600,000 in changes come into play as well. If those do not, that total would be $1.9 million. So those two will offset. We also maneuvered the technology refresh that typically is shown up in the capital improvement plan to the operating budget. So that is an increase of $705,000. We are proposing a restoration of the Targeted Assistance Program to provide support to teachers to become certified in areas of need, dual enrollment, special education, those ELL areas. The Wilson Reading Training Program is for special ed students. That goes along with those 2 FTEs that we talked about in the staffing. That is $32,000. And then an increase in the school operating allocation based on enrollment, an increase of $35,000. So when we look at our total revenues, I don't know that it moved. We are asking for an additional $1.8 million or 2.3% from Williamsburg and James City County to support our proposed budget. We did receive additional sales tax allocation from the state, 4.2% or $486,000. Additionally, we received some additional state monies for SOQ and categorical incentive programs for $617,000. A portion of that in the proposed budget is related to the compensation increase that went through the General Assembly, and that makes up about $340,000 of that $618,000. Then we have other revenues that we're proposing an increase of 5% or $33,000. So this just gives you a snapshot. Again, we're expecting a 200 student increase or 1.8%. In the proposed budget, there is a change, an additional request for 20 FTEs. Part of that is restoration of positions that were eliminated during the recession, the increase for the enrollment, as well as to meet the specific needs that have been outlined for our instruction. The overall operating budget is increasing by 2.9% or $2.9 million or 2.4%, excuse me. And our pure pupil cost is rising to $10,645. Then we take a look at our operating revenue summary. You can see that the majority of our funding does come from the local funding bodies, so we're very reliant on the support of Williamsburg and James City County. I would like to point out that under the state funding, we benchmark a lot of times against 2009 because that's when the recession started. Our state funding is still about $1 million less than what it was in 2009, so I think it's important to show that we're still facing several of those decreases that we experienced during the recession. Then to talk a little bit about our capital improvement plan. There are two projects that are highlighted, Claire Bird Baker refurbishment, as well as the James River roof replacement. Those two items we pulled out specifically because we have third-party contractors that have said that those items need to happen this year, so we prevent additional repair costs that come through. You do see the school bus replacement plan that does include the Smoothing 9 bus plan that we have implemented as the school division. And there are other miscellaneous projects that we group together to total $891,000. And when you're reviewing our budget document, you can see those on pages 135 and 136 of the budget document. But those are parking lot expansions, different things that are on the normal refurbishment and repair cycle. Again, the fourth middle school is included in the budget for $25.8 million. There is $4.9 million in the fiscal year 15 budget, so we can start that design phase, which we are going through the process of that right now. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Constantino.
This next slide is one that you've seen many times before, but what the heck, one more time in terms of the middle school timeline. And just to let you know that we have issued an RFP for design services. That RFP closed, I think, this week. And we plan on following this timeline and bringing to the school board our recommendation for design in April. So, I'm going to ask you to reach into that black folder one more time, maybe two more times. You have another infographic there, another document that is a regular 8.5 by 11, and it indicates the portrait of a graduate. We get a lot of questions, and the community is also always very interested in the performance of the students that leave our school system, how they, and what categories they were in, how they performed when they were here, what their future plans are, what programs and services we provide to students. And as we try to become better at telling our story and try to become better at sharing information in a manner that everybody can understand as opposed to books full of charts full of numbers, we have created this portrait of a graduate, which we have shared with the school board and sharing with you now. Again, if you start on the upper left-hand side, it will give you SAT information, AP information, the total numbers of exams taken by our students for AP, and the ACT test. I think we all understand that the ACT test is becoming more popular. More students are taking the every year there seems to be an increase in the number of students who take ACT, a slight decrease or maintenance of students who take an SAT. And then the college career readiness benchmark assessments. that our students are taking. If you look in the lower left, we've tried to color code where our students are, what our students are planning to do after graduation. You'll see our on-time graduation rates, cohort completion rate. A cohort completion rate, ladies and gentlemen, because high school graduation, graduation rates, cohort completion rates, and dropout rates are 4 different numbers. A cohort completion are the students who started in 9th grade, stayed with us for 4 years, and exited in grade 12. It does not take into account all of the changes of students who come and go within that 4-year. And the state measures us. These measurements that we're sharing you are the accountability that we show to the Commonwealth. You'll see the percentage of advanced degrees and standard degrees for all of our schools. But what I wanted to draw your attention to as well, and this is something that I'm pretty proud of, and hopefully you are too. There's always comments about how the school division needs to do more for students in career and technical education. And we understand that, and you know we have a partnership with New Horizons, but we also do a great deal here. Over on the right-hand side of this, you'll see information about students that are enrolled in CTE courses, the certifications that are earned, the industry certifications that we offer, and we're seeing a great increase in that. This morning I had the privilege of being invited to speak to the State Association of Human Resources officials. They happen to be having their conference here in Williamsburg, and these are human resources people primarily from the business sector. And they invited me to come and talk with them. And initially I said, what could I possibly have to say to 600 human resource people outside of crack a few human resource jokes and move on? What they were interested in is workforce development. What they were interested in is our perception of what we can do to partner to increase workforce readiness and workforce development. And so I shared some of the things that we were doing in Williamsburg, James City County. I shared the work that we were doing with manufacturing. Many of you were right in this room where we had over 100 kids who participated in Manufacturing Day, who were learning about careers right in their own community. Where the first year we started perhaps with a handful of students. Second year that exploded exponentially. And I think sometimes when you're so close to things, you start to take them for granted, because I was talking very matter-of-factly about the work that we were doing in the school division to help parents, our own staff, and our students understand career and explore career opportunities, specifically in manufacturing with our partnership with AME and such. And at the end of my talk, I can't tell you the number of people who came up to me who were mesmerized by what we had accomplished and gave me their card and said, you know, can we come and talk with you? Or could you come and talk with us? Could you help us do what you have done? And it reminded me for just a fleeting moment that, again, we have done some great things for our kids. And the manufacturing partnership is just one. Our partnership with New Horizons is another. The industry certifications that we're providing to our kids is just another. We are doing the very best we can to meet the demands of our kids and hopefully meet the demands of the workforce. We work closely, very pleased to work with the Chamber and work with other organizations, the Peninsula Workforce Development Organization. All of those things are critical, mission critical to us. Are we preparing the kinds of students that are going to be successful regardless of whether they go to 4-year university, 2-year university, trade school, technical school, the military? Are we going to make sure that our product is what the business community and industry wants? And so I share that with you just as an aside, because it was an interesting conversation that I almost took for granted, and then realized how very special and unique it was when others came up and said, we'd love to be able to replicate that in our community. This again, I think I've showed you on the infographic, just highlighted a few things that I think that you might be interested in. And back where we started, who knows what the future will hold? You can read and hear a lot about what our state, what our federal government is doing. We are 9 years overdue for reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act at the federal level. There is some conversation going on about that now, which could have a huge impact on public education in the United States. We also know that there are significant changes happening in the Commonwealth. For example, The state legislature has already eliminated a handful of SOL tests for next year. So accreditation, the ball keeps being moved and the rules keep changing. But with every ball move and every change, we do our best to rise to the occasion. I'm pleased that of the 134 school systems in the Commonwealth of Virginia, 22 of them remain fully accredited. We're one of those 22. And so not to ignore our challenges, but to be transparent about the challenges that we have, the changing dynamics of our students, the changing dynamics of our community. But I would be remiss if I didn't say we also have a great deal to be proud of, that there's a lot right with what we do. And the support of this community, the support of the elected officials in your engagement and your involvement in education, I think is critical to the future success for all of us. And so on behalf of the school system, I thank you. 1,800 employees thank you. I know our classroom teachers are very appreciative of your support. They understand clearly. I meet with them regularly, and they clearly understand how critical local support is to our mission in the school system. And we know that as the state perhaps has not stepped up, you have. And that does not go unnoticed by anyone in our workforce. So thank you. With that, I will open it up to whatever discussion you'd like to have, any questions that you have. If you don't mind, I'll just take my seat again, or would you like me to just stand here?
Just stand there for a second.
Yes,
See
sir.
what we're doing. Are there any
I tried.
questions?
Let the record show I tried to sit back.
I know you did. The record show that I told you not to. Are there any questions? Ms. Jones.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Quick question, and reviewing the school board meeting from, I believe it was March 3rd, and the discussion about the health care and the impacts of 2018 with the Affordable Health Care Act. I understand, correct me if I'm mistaken, the schools are enrolled in, it's the PPO, which is more expensive because it's being able to keep their doctors. Is that correct? And if I heard the conversation correctly, other school districts have already changed over from that type of plan and reducing their expenses.
Right. We're recommending the PPO plans. There are various levels of PPO, and what we're recommending is to shift those so that we can recover some savings in the increases. This is the first time since I've been here where we've seen such a significant increase in insurance. We also know that with the Affordable Health Care Act, there are some rules and regulations coming into effect in 2018, some changes we would need to make anyway. So we are making those changes, and we're presently sharing those with the workforce to get their input. You know, we haven't even, we've proposed the idea to the school board. The school board hasn't had the opportunity to have a full conversation about it as well. But we are looking to change the health insurance programs to eliminate some of the more robust programs and allow our workforce still have choice, but choice that is a little bit more economical for the school division.
Thank you.
Along those same lines.
Mr. Honza.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman. Along those same lines, with my kids in the school and several teachers who are personal friends, I am very engaged with our teachers on a regular basis. And often I hear the perception that they are doing more for less. They see their net pay decreasing, which we certainly all understand is about some of the things we've talked about in healthcare today. From the proposed budget, what would our contribution to their healthcare be, just approximately, generalization? How has increased healthcare impacted teachers' net pay, and how will that impact in our upcoming fiscal year 2016 budget? If we move forward with this and the proposed teacher increases, how will their net pay be impacted given additional healthcare cost changes?
I'm going to give you the superintendent's answer and then turn it over to somebody who really knows what they're talking about. You're going to laugh when I say this. It depends. It depends on what insurance plan you get. It depends on what type of insurance. It's different for a single employee, employee plus one, or an employee who's looking for family coverage under one of the different plans. I'm going to allow Christina to elaborate a little bit more on your question about impact on net pay.
Most employees that switch plans will see an increase in their net pay with the proposed salary increase. If they choose to stay, I think the only plan that will remain where they have a decrease in their net pay, number one, is if they're at the top of the pay scale and they don't get a salary increase. That, of course, would not offset any increase in health insurance. However, if they're in the second level insurance that we offer right now and choose to stay, they will see a decrease in their net pay. But there's options for them to choose to go to a different plan to make their net pay increase. So, and the other piece to this is that you have to have opportunity to educate employees on what these health insurance changes are and how they affect them. I think it's important that we begin to look, and this is, and I've said this to our board, this is a baby step in how we approach what's changing in 2018. When we move to 2018, you can't make those drastic changes all in 1 year without having the opportunity to educate your employees. So this is a short-term fix for a long-term goal that we will progress to, but most employees will see an increase in their net pay should they make the right decisions to do so. I hope that answers your question.
I think from my perspective, it's going to force all of us who have health insurance, it's going to force all of us to pay more attention to it. We're going to have to make decisions about health insurance. I think every American is going to have to make decisions about health insurance because it's a changing landscape. Our challenge is going to be to educate our workforce so that you can try to take a somewhat complicated system of options and plans and make the very best decision. The best decision for me and the best decision for an employee with 3 children at home probably will be different. So we still believe that those options are available. Most of the employees will not see a net decrease. There's only one category in which if employees stay where they are, and we're giving them other options, and they'll need to explore those options and do some math, quite frankly. But if they take those other options, they'll see, they won't see the decrease. If they stick where they are, then most likely they will.
Any other questions?
Mr. Cook, could I just follow up on that for a moment? Because I would like to get a kind of sense of the modal contribution that an employee of the school system is making to their health coverage. And my guess is that that modal employee probably is seeking family coverage. So I don't necessarily ask you to provide that number for me right this moment, but could I just ask for a
we'll send it to you.
What share of the health coverage is being carried by the employee for family coverage for a modal for a mid-range plan?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go again.
That's right.
Mr. Chairman. As I'm sure everybody's seen in the news, our county is facing some significant budget constraints. And as we saw, our city and county are the primary contributors to the school board budget. Many of our residents may be facing a tax increase with our current budget cycle. One of the easy suggestions that folks give to us on our board is cut spending. Stop spending so much, get rid of bloated overhead for us at the county, for you all at the school board. In going through the presentation, you all touched on some of the efficiencies. Could you just give us and our viewers an idea of how the WJCC schools look toward efficiencies, the ongoing process, and what has been done over the last couple of years and will continue to be done to make sure that we are getting the most out of every dollar, that we are keeping the funds focused on the classroom, and basically what has been done and will be done to make the best and most efficient use of every dollar.
Great question, and I appreciate the question. And I bet that there'll be school board members that want to chime in too, so I'll give you my answer and then be quiet. A few years ago, we were exposed to a program through the Center for Performance and Quality called the North Star program. And what intrigued us about learning about this was that it brought performance and process management to school divisions, something that, honestly, many school divisions are not real good at. It seemed logical to me that if we could start to dissect and understand how we were doing things, we would find savings. So let me give you an example. We started with 3 different projects. One of them was looking at overtime costs in the school system. Another project was looking at extended contracts and contracts that we give to people to do extra duties, anything from football coach to club sponsor, all those things that teachers step forward are willing to do. And we also looked at my personal favorite, copy machines and copy paper, which I think is probably the downfall of Western civilization. We have been able to already see over $100,000 in savings just by doing things differently, just by studying contracts, asking questions that quite frankly hadn't been asked because we're going through learning a process. Why is this contract this number of days? And when you start asking those kinds of questions, you start peeking under rocks and looking under the hood, you realize that there are some of the reasons are because that's the way it's always been. And we're finding that, I can remember one meeting where we proposed $80,000 in contract savings to the school board simply by bringing contracts in line with the needs of today's needs of the school division as opposed to the needs of the school division perhaps 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. You know, we are looking at efficiencies in terms of how we do RFPs and contracts, copy machines, for example. Some people will suggest to you that I'm fixated on the topic. I'm not fixated on the topic. I just think there's money to be saved with this issue. So we already are buying off of a different contract. We're going to see every time a machine comes out of service and a new machine goes into service, we will see savings over the next 3 or 4 years. So we're looking at these ideas. We're now looking at, we're doing a performance management process with required employee training to see, can we recoup, if we do a better job, for example, if we do a better job in training, safety training of our employees, can we recover costs in terms of money that we put out for insurances and things like that. So we're committed to learning that and doing that, and we tackle these projects one at a time, and we bring to the school board our reports and our results of what we've done. So the numbers aren't clear in my head. I know it's well over 100,000 now, probably climbing toward 200,000 by the time we get into the next school year. And I hope that number just continues to increase because we're able to repurpose those monies back and redirect those monies and not have to ask for additional funding because we've used it in a different manner. And I don't know if any school board members want to add to that, but.
Mrs. Kordaska.
Well, I guess a couple of things I'd like to point out about the process is that we were allowed to identify the areas that we felt we wanted to tackle, and it was not a top-down process. Everybody was from different sectors were invited to participate. So what ends up happening is, rather than it being a prescribed change, it becomes an organizational change because people begin to think differently. They are valued for their input. There may be, and there have been, times in which we have found employees that were doing things very efficiently in one area, but no one else knew that they were doing it that way and that it could be replicated in other areas. So, you know, as you can imagine, the last topic that he mentioned, copiers and paper usage, is extraordinarily a hot topic, and we were able to implement a fairly large change. And I don't believe that you heard back from anybody about it. At least we didn't hear any as far as pushback because people were able to be part of the process. And it's one of those situations in which educators were never exposed to this idea. This actually dovetails a little bit with our partnership with the Association of Manufacturers Excellence, so we're starting to think in a different way. Certainly not that we're a business per se, but that there is value to examining process. You know, why do you do that? And so I think there are many other areas in which it can be applied, and it will be applied because it does begin to become an organizational change in the mind. And Dr. Constantino is too too humble to mention this, but we're actually asked to present on this at the National School Boards Association as a way for other school boards to begin to look at this as a cost-saving measure. And it's something that I think we can really tout as a great success.
Mr. Nichols.
The other factor about our school budget is that a lot of the mandates are federally or state directed. So there's very little wiggle room where we can cut efficiencies there in terms of IDEA for special needs, as that piece of legislation was passed 40 years ago. And right now, it's only about 13–14% the federal government. I think it's what was it, Ruth? 17% of that of the cost of educating a child today in special ed is paid only 17% from the federal government. The rest of it is all of us here locally to meet those mandates. And as legislation moves around in the General Assembly, oftentimes there's unfunded mandates that come our way that we are forced to pick up here in order to meet the legislature or the statutes. So we're kind of like, the organization is trapped between the mandates of state and federal government to meet requirements, and then also to come up with the funding for those to meet those requirements.
Sure. Thank you. I was just simply going to add that way back when Governor Warner was in office, this school division took part in an efficiency study and was found to be very efficient, in fact, understaffed in our central office. So you can imagine what we've had to do at our central office since that time. You know, we've consolidated positions, we haven't replaced people. So we have always been on a continuous improvement track to try to be as efficient as possible. And I would just have to say it again, what Mr. Nichols just said. You know, there was legislation just with the General Assembly that just ended, where there's now training required for restraint. And, you know, some very good legislation comes out, but that's an unfunded mandate. That's something that we have to then pick up. And we have those all the time. So sometimes to someone that's just looking in, you know, they may they don't understand or see the efficiencies that we do have, but also understand that there are lots of things that we just simply don't get an opinion on. We just have to spend the money. So
I also think too, and I say this as my opinion, I do not speak for the Williamsburg James City School Board in what I'm about to say. Let me make that very clear. This is Steve's opinion. The standards of quality, which are the rules that govern schools in the Commonwealth, are, in my opinion, antiquated. And we, as superintendents and school boards, have lobbied a great deal about, you know, as we become more efficient in the division level, the state needs to become more efficient in determining the standards of quality and what are appropriate, because the standards of quality also drive expenses. And it is my opinion, for example, that there are standards that are antiquated in which if we were released from those, we could redirect monies somewhere where they're needed. But we have to follow the SOQs. I have to sign my name to a document swearing that we have done, you know, what we're supposed to do. And so all of that, and I'm hoping, the school board spends a great deal of time monitoring, great deal of time lobbying in Richmond. We're seeing some cracks in the wall about that flexibility. I think we're finally figuring out that things that have been in place for 20 or 30 years might not be the best. And as these things change at the state level, I hope that that translates into more flexibility for us to redirect funds. But the point that a couple of the board members make that I can only echo one more time is that every time a decision is made in terms of what a school system needs to do, rarely is there any money behind it. And it's left to us to implement you must implement the training. Mr. Superintendent, you must sign this document saying that you did it. And by the way, you find the money to pay for it.
Dr. Constantino, two topics, if you will. The first is, could you explain the reasoning for the moving of the technology refresh from capital to operating? And then talk a little bit about the overall health of the bus fleet and what the $1 million investment in new buses represents towards maintaining that.
We've had an ongoing discussion for a number of years about whether or not the technology refresh was appropriately placed in the CIP. And there are two very distinct opinions about that, yes and no. It seemed a good time to try to absorb that into the operating budget. We also were trying to lighten the load of the CIP, understanding that the middle school was there. So one of my goals was to not do anything that didn't absolutely have to be done. We moved it into the operation, basically absorbed it, so that we could move forward with the technology that our students need. So that was the thinking behind that. There's been an ongoing conversation between the finance departments and the county and the city, the three of us. It's one of those, it depends on how you look at it. You know, you could make an argument that technology is a capital expense. You could make an argument that because it's on a 3-year refresh cycle, maybe it's not, or a 5-year refresh cycle, maybe it's not a capital expense. So we just decided to perhaps be more transparent and be more clear and just absorb it into the operational budget. The second question you asked about the health of the bus fleet. When I arrived again in 11, buses, there had been somewhat of a discontinuation of the purchasing of buses through the depths of the recession. And as a result of that, we are not able to provide the kind of service. For example, you'll hear the school board talk all about changing the tiered system, changing start times. We don't have enough buses to do that. In order to do that, we would have to add X number of buses to the fleet, and I can get you that information. I don't have it off the top of my head. What the CIP does for us is to continue to refresh those buses that age out. And it's 9 buses a year. It's a plan that we developed and brought to the school board a year or two ago. And it's simply to maintain the fleet we have. It does not add buses, and it does not begin to move toward fixing some of the issues that we have with transportation and ultimately with the tiered starting system that we have. The school board would like to do that, and they have been very clear to me, and we want to do that. This didn't seem to me, it didn't seem prudent to put that into the capital expense this year, largely, again, because of my thinking, and you can blame me if you don't agree, my thinking that with the middle school there, we needed to have as trim of a CIP as possible, and then figure out in 17, 18, 19, and 20 how we were going to continue on with this process.
Mr. Pons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Switching gears a little bit from the budget, I appreciate all the discussion about the disadvantaged students and how that number of population is growing. And I really do appreciate more the efforts that are going to make sure that those needs of those students are being met. I guess my question is there a trend in terms of results that we're not seeing in some of these documents? Are we seeing test scores come down? Is there a threat to accreditation to any of the schools?
There's always a threat of accreditation. And the threat has never been bigger than this year because I don't know what to expect. I don't know what accreditation is going to look like because the numbers of tests have been altered by the legislature. So, is accreditation threatened? Yes, very much so. But is it threatened by socioeconomically disadvantaged students? No. As it's in the last few years, as you have read and heard us talk about, the state has implemented more rigorous testing. And any time the state implements a more rigorous test, the entire state drops. There is this change process where everybody goes downhill, and then slowly we climb out of it. And you heard in the video that after 2 years of the new math test, and some of you will remember a couple of years ago where we gave you an opportunity to answer some of the math questions that 3rd and 4th graders had to answer. And my recollection was you did reasonably well. So we're starting to climb out of these kinds of things. But reading tests were just changed, so we saw the dip in reading scores, and we're going to have to climb out of that. And that's why the trend analysis with the like school divisions became important to us, because if we were dipping and others like us were not. We need to find out why. But that's not the case. What is the case is that we're at the top or near the top of the folks who are like us. I want to be clear about when we talk about subgroups of students, we don't talk about subgroups of students in terms of making excuses for performance. We talk about subgroups of students in terms of what they need to be successful. And it clearly is more resources. Students, for example, research will tell us that socioeconomically disadvantaged students are exposed to less vocabulary from 0 to 3. And so when they come into preschool, they come into kindergarten, they might hear 100 or 200 words a day when the average kindergartner might hear 15 or 1,600 words a day. So there are deficits that can be made up, but it requires staffing, it requires materials, it requires program changes. And at the end of the day, when you're starting to meet the needs of all of our students, it requires increases in budget areas where we are not we're not satisfied with the performance that we have. I don't know if that answers your question or muddies the waters even more.
Ms. Jones?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question as to the status regarding the discussion surrounding the block scheduling. I know this has been discussed over the years, and we have had citizens bring to us that it is actually a much more expensive way of educating, and it limits the choices, the academic choices of the students that are attending our high schools. And also there was a question brought up as to whether or not we were meeting the required instructional hours. So, Dr.
The second question, the answer is yes. The first question is something that the school board has asked us to do. The school board asked two things of us this year. One, to look at the start times for high schools. There has been a lot of literature and a lot of attention paid to adolescents and allowing them more sleep and starting at a later time. And so the school board asked us to study that particular issue. And along with that, to study the whole notion of the high school schedule. We have pretty much concluded our work with the start times, and the chain around our ankle to the bedpost is the buses. You know, if we had more buses, we'd have more flexibility, we could have different start times, and I don't want to stand here and say if. So we are now moving this year and next year into looking at the high school schedules. The reason that I delayed that a little bit is because the legislature is also looking at high school design. And I happen to know that there's some interest among some legislators and the State Department of Education in looking at if we were to start with a white sheet of paper and design high schools in the 21st century, what would they look like? I think we need to consider, for example, online learning and blended learning, move on when ready, flexibility in learning, personalized learning, all of these things that we need to accomplish. So so the answer to your question is yes, we need to study the high school schedules. We need to determine the cost of what we do now, which has been in effect for a long, long time. There was a schedule change, a high school schedule change that the school board looked at in 2010, just as I was coming in. But I think a more robust look at that is necessary, and we'll probably be bringing a report back to the school board in the late fall and say, here are some options that we can look at, looking at the parameters that are set for us in terms of transportation, in terms of finance, but I'm really hoping, and I can see my staff sitting there all the time because I always say hope is not a strategy, but I'm really hoping that some of these things that the state is talking about, there are some pilot opportunities for school systems to try some things differently, because if there is, I would be first in line to try one of those pilots.
Mrs. Larson.
Thank you. I apologize because I'm going to do an if. But the other place where buses would help us is Governor's School enrollment and also participation in New Horizons, which is both regional schools that we are owners of. And often it's just a deterrent for our kids because of the time that they have to catch the bus, etc. But that we do that because of the amount of buses that we're dealing with. So, excuse me.
Mr. Fuentes.
Back to the block schedule discussion. I bring this up only because I know there's some that kind of want to look at possibly changing it for the different reasons that Ms. Jones brought up. I've always been an advocate for several reasons, and I remember back, I think it was like around 96 timeframe when that was instituted in the Williamsburg, James City County schools, and it was a major topic of discussion back then. Interesting, in neighborhoods it pitted family against family, I remember, literally. Changing it, I don't think we should take real lightly, but I want to point out that our high schools, and we have the numbers to show it over the years, have outperformed every high school on the peninsula. And I've saved that information, and more recently, I think the ACT scores that we got last year showed that. But we have scores every year that show that we've outperformed. I've looked at various studies throughout the country, and the studies showed the advantages of the modified block scheduling. And I don't know how familiar everyone is with Pennsylvania. There's a county up there, Bucks County, with very affluent schools, and some of the top schools in the country are located there, and they have gone to the modified block schedule. What I do agree with Dr. Constantino. Going in the future, there's some technology that we can take advantage of that will help change things. But as far as the block schedule, there's a whole host of reasons, and I don't mind that we go look at all that, but I don't take it lightly that we change something that, of the one thing that we are doing, the high schools seem to be outperforming everybody locally on the peninsula. So that's important to me. I mean, we have results that show that, and is it a little more expensive? Probably. But I think there's a lot of advantages for the kids. I had both my kids went through that, and I saw major advantages with it. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Mr. Onazuk.
Building on Mr. Freeling's question and going back to school buses, just more for clarification and to finalize this topic, at least in my mind. Some folks come to me looking at our capital improvement budget and say, that's a lot of money for new buses, just send them on the buses we have. So could you explain to our citizens and the folks watching today the life cycle of a bus? Is it just that we like our kids to go to school in fancy buses, so we're getting new ones? Or is there a reason, as I understand it, buses have a particular life cycle? Can you just briefly explain what that is and when and why they are due for replacement?
Yes, I think so. If not, I have lots of help over here who can, I think I can get this right. The state recommends a bus replacement cycle of 150,000 miles or 15 years. Because of the geography of our county and because of the numbers of buses we have, most of our buses exceed 180,000 miles before the 15-year period. Once a bus hits that threshold, it's deemed should be out of service. What I don't want, the situation that I don't want to be in is to have an unfortunate situation with a bus someday and find out that that bus should have been pulled off the road a year ago. So we have actually created for the school board a chart of all of our buses, what year they were purchased, what their mileage is, when we expect them to age out of service, and that's what we have based the bus replacement plan on, so that we can keep every bus in our fleet up to code, so to speak. So it is not a question of fancy buses. I think if you were to ask the average student, buses haven't changed all that much, and they're still the big cheese, and nobody wants to ride them once they turn 14 years old. But my goal is to not put buses out in which safety is compromised, or there is a question as to whether or not that bus should be used.
Mr. Chairman? One second. Mrs. Cordasco first.
And as far as the New Horizons Governor School situation, I think it's important that we make it clear that we're not paying for slots that we don't use. We pay per student. However, what Mrs. Larson was saying is that our high schools begin at 7:20. So in order for our kids to be transported to the Governor's School or to New Horizons, they are picked up substantially earlier to meet at a central location where another bus transports them. So in this environment in which we are really beginning to talk about other types of credentialing that may or may not include 2 or 4 year college experience, we have very excellent programs that have already been set up, that have already been fully staffed. Lots of the machinery is there, everything is in place, and we have students that are not taking advantage of that because of that substantial time issue. So that's what we're talking about in terms of buses. You know, we do have an opportunity. We are participating along with all the other divisions in building a special education building for our emotionally disturbed and autistic children that is going to be on the Woodside campus. It's the New Horizon campus. It's near Woodside High School, and we'll have an opportunity then to retrofit the existing building and to perhaps bring some additional programs. But very few of our programs are at Woodside. They're at Butler Farm Road in Hampton, which is a substantial journey. So, you know, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about new buses. And yes, safety is absolutely an issue, just like replace your car in a certain amount of time. But I think it's also important to note that we are missing out on students participating in a very, very highly rated Governor's School and New Horizons simply because of the additional time that they have to spend. So.
Mr. Kennedy.
A couple of things. The new bus situation has been going on. I've been sitting in this room for quite some time, and I remember Kay Ainsworth brought this up on an annual basis, and we've never gotten our arms around it. A couple of things that I'd like to say is this past year we had a debate back during the last budget when you had some excess funds that what we're going to do with that. And we brought up buses. I did, Mr. Onazuk did, Mr. Hippel, and we talked about New Horizons. And the folks that were there representing the schools that evening said everything was fine. Had all the buses you needed. Weren't worried about New Horizons. We were worried about that. We brought the issue up because we wanted to see those cost savings go back into buses. So I'd recommend in the future, if we do have those cost savings, and if we can realize putting those into buses and getting caught up so we can do some of these things, I think that that's very important. The county administrator has proposed providing funding for some buses in his new budget coming forward. Well, he hasn't released that yet, but that was the plan. If that budget is to go through, I would hope in the past where there has been some monies back in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, where we allocated monies to a different administration for buses. The money was used for something different, and each year we continually heard, we need buses. So I would hope and I would expect that you would utilize that for buses if we were to do it. I think it's a very important issue, one where certainly we'd like to see the kids, and I hear about from a lot of the parents in my district whose kids are in New Horizons, that they would like to see them not have to get up so early and leave so early, and the disadvantages that they have already that they're facing and some of the things that they want to do so that they have that equal opportunity that everyone else has. So I would hope that if we are able to get this approved this year, that we can move forward on some of these buses and put this issue to bed once and for all, and get on a good replacement schedule. And I know it's very important, and I know it's challenging, and it's one of the first things that we look at. The other area that's been brought up today, and it has been brought up continuously at some of our board meetings, are a lot of school issues. For whatever reason, we have folks that come out to the Board of Supervisors meetings and talk to us about policies and curriculum and a variety of issues, school budgets. Those aren't our responsibilities. I'd like to start referring some of those questions to you, Dr. Constantino, and your staff for some answers that we can give to these folks when they do come to our meetings, if that would be acceptable to you, because some of these issues about block scheduling and such, they're coming up repeatedly, and I'd like to get these folks some answers so maybe it gives them a little bit of clarity. We've encouraged them to come to your meetings and to speak before the school board, but for some reason that hasn't happened. So I just want you to prepare that we'll send some of those questions over to you, and I hope that you can get them back to us.
I will do my best. I answer questions every day.
Thank you very much.
As far as the buses, Mr. Kennedy, I think you can sleep well at night. I don't think the school board is going to let a minute go by if there were money appropriated to buses, and if the superintendent even suggested for a moment that that money be spent somewhere else, that probably wouldn't go over well. So I think we're pretty good on the bus thing. We have a replacement plan. Buses, by the way, just for the public's knowledge, about $100,000 a bus. Just to give you an idea of what it would take to not only replace buses that age out, but also to increase the fleet to the point of where we'd have the flexibility for start times and things like that.
And what is that new number of buses that you feel that you need to have the fleet that you need?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I don't have that number in front of me. I will send you the document. I'm afraid to say it because it's on TV and there are reporters here and I don't want to be wrong. So let me send the document that we gave to the school board.
Mr. Nichols.
Well, I thought we had bought buses from end-of-year funds, and there were requests made to the Board of Supervisors to approve those expenditures. So there were, we bought, I think, 9 buses or something, because of the Great Recession hit us too, and it was hard to replace any buses during that time frame. So we're trying to make up for that period of time.
Any other comments from members? Ms. Jones?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I just wanted to relay input that I have heard from citizens and also feedback that we had in the most recent Virginia Tech Citizen Survey. Overwhelmingly, one of the greatest concerns expressed by the citizens that did respond was a lack of vocational training offered within our public schools. I know we have a variety of opportunities with going off campus and going to Hampton and also the Thomas Nelson and what is offered there. However, I think it is important to recognize that that is a concern the citizens have. I am not an expert in curriculum, nor is it my job. I am simply relaying it. I think it's very important that the way our educational system, our public school system is set up right now, the vocational training requires students to be separated from their school and from their other classmates. And I think that's something we as a community need to think about as we move forward and how we're educating. And I know you state frequently, how best to educate, it's the education of the 21st century. But I also think it is very important to understand there is that concern. As you said, our school system is doing a lot and maybe not doing a good enough job of communicating that out into the community.
I think that's the issue. And we have talked this year, one of our goals, and actually in discussions with the school board, is getting this information out, telling our story a little bit better than we have in the past. We have a number of career and technical programs that we offer right here in our schools. We have an entire Project Lead the Way STEM initiative at War Hill High School, which numerous students are involved in. But honestly, and to your point, we have struggled in getting that information out because no matter what we do, we hear that as well, that you need to do more. So I think we have a PR problem, quite frankly. And I also think there's always room for improving those programs. There's always room for expansion. But we also rely on student interest. Students drive what we offer. And so there are some courses where there is no student interest. We're going to take those monies and put them where there is student interest. And right now, that interest is focused on engineering issues, STEM issues. We're seeing great interest in those. And then some of these office certifications and other certifications, which we do offer in our high schools. And we would let any parent who has a question about those to please contact the school principal or the guidance counselor and talk about the offerings that are available here, because we do have them. Thank you for that. Good point.
Mayor Holman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this data. I'm going to be wonkish for a minute. Both of these sets of data are really terrifically interesting, but they raise a number of questions. I don't expect answers today, but I'd like you to think about this. The portrait of graduate classes. What would be interesting to me is what of these differences are statistically significant, and if they are statistically significant, what are some of the determinants of those statistically significant differences? You know, that, I don't know if that's possible to do that, but that would be a very interesting sort of piece of information to have. The other is the SOL performance with comparable school districts. And two things strike me there. One is, as I look at this, all of these other school districts, we have 15 schools. All these others have between 19 and 26 schools. There must be some...
I wasn't going to point that out.
There might be some efficiency of scale there, but then when you look down at economically disadvantaged or students with disability or limited English proficiency, those numbers vary dramatically as well. Have you given any thought, or is it possible to begin to look at sort of, as you look at sort of the cost of educating a student, how much efficiency do we gain by having fewer schools, economies of scale there, versus some of the costs that are associated with students with needs? And is that a type of analysis that you could do? Is that worth pursuing?
It's an interesting question, because the other question that comes to my mind is what efficiencies are we losing?
Yes, exactly.
As a result of what I would consider a significantly less number of campuses and buildings that like schools have. It's an interesting question, and so my answer is I need to think about that and talk with people who are smarter than I am to figure out what data do we have available and what would it take to do some of that analysis. I think it's a great question.
Yeah, it just seems to me that some things that jump out that say we need to know more about these if we're going to in fact provide the best education most efficiently going into the future. And I think all of us have that as an objective as we go forward. But again, this is the first time I've seen this type of really comparable information, and it raises some questions that I think we could spend some time looking at. So thank you for doing that.
My pleasure. And we need the answers to these questions. I think we can sit back and be pretty proud of ourselves anytime we compare ourselves to the state of the nation. I think the proof is, how do we compare with people who are pretty much like us? And what can we learn? And if we're falling short, why are we falling short? And can we get in the car and drive to Rappahannock and find out what they're doing that we're not?
Mrs. Kordaska.
Just wanted to go back to Ms. Jones' question, and I wanted to just talk a little bit, because again, a lot of people watch these meetings, and that's how a lot of our information gets out. The Project Lead the Way that was mentioned, actually a group of our students went to DC to present. They have been recognized and acknowledged. Jamestown High School's engineering class is in the finalist for the building of the ship. There is significant activity going on that people don't always know about. And I think I would really encourage people to ask about the vocational opportunities. In addition, we have 2 Explorer programs that exist. They're under the Boy Scout auspices, but they are publicized through our school system. One is a Medical Explorers that's held at Centera Hospital, in which people can explore medical careers, not just doctor and nurse, but pharmaceutical, a lot of other options. And the other is firefighting EMT, which then we do have an EMT program locally here in our War Hill High School for people that might want to pursue that. So I would, just again say we're absolutely open to new suggestions, especially if they are driven by student interest. And it is also one of the reasons why we did include parents in our manufacturing day discussion, so that they could see some of the other opportunities, because we do have to educate parents as well that it isn't just always a 2- and 4-year college degree that is the ticket to having a job, which is ultimately the goal that people have. And we were also able to participate recently with the county and with the Association for Manufacturers Excellence in presenting to all the economic directors throughout the state of the Commonwealth, what our manufacturing day looks like and how they might be able to implement that into their divisions. Because, one hand really feeds the other. If we're aware of the type of industries that actually have good paying jobs and career pathways, then we can have our economic development policies mirror that, so that we're bringing those into our city and county. And I was teasing earlier, I did distribute the Target magazine that wrote up our manufacturing day, saying that we would love to illustrate some manufacturing in the city. So if you guys get that together for us, let us know, and we will be happy to include that in our tour next year.
Ms. Knudsen.
Also on the subject of vocational education, I think part of the PR should be the proximity of Thomas Nelson's historic Triangle campus. There are a number of programs up there, including the Career Cafe, the things that the workforce development people are doing there. And I think it's something not a lot of people know about, and we need to talk about it.
Yep.
One other follow-up on VOTEC. A couple of years back, I believe there was some talk about the number of students that you had going to college 2 and 4 years, and how many of those students didn't stay enrolled, how many left those colleges and universities. Has there ever been a study on how many of the kids that have gone to VOTEC and if they've followed those career paths and where they are today? Have you ever looked at any of those numbers?
Not to my knowledge.
That might be an interesting research of some data to see how successful that program is, which would give it some credibility into our community college locally here, and we can partner with them.
Great.
Mr. Chipman?
Thank you. I'd just like to, no need in going over all the questions and answers that we had today, but I just want to say the staff that we have in the school system, they do such a wonderful job. My wife works with them more than I do when we go back and forth with all the children, but I've got to say how dedicated I see it every time I walk in the building. And our job is to go over the numbers and try to crunch the numbers and keep it as tight as possible, and bring everything in to as close as we can to keep the money and how we spend it and all that. But a lot of times in these meetings we forget to talk about all the people behind the scenes that are doing so many things to make our community better. And I just want to give a shout out to all the staff, the teachers, everybody connected with the school system, and how well they do and all the work that they do for the county. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Larson?
Thank you. I did want to follow up on the New Horizons piece, because I think it's something that we as a community too, that we have to own and we have to talk about more, because it's not saying that a child isn't going to go to a 2-year school or go to 4-year school. We have children that go down to New Horizons, do pharmacy tech, do cosmetology, turn around, and that is the way they finance their way through college, is that they're able to support themselves. So I think it requires us as a community being more open to something different as well and having those conversations. Because frankly, we can't replicate what is done down at New Horizons. We can't afford that. And so while we do have these many programs in our schools, the things that we can offer at New Horizons is something that we really do need to take advantage of, and we're very fortunate to be a regional partner there. So, I would like to see us do more of that, and that is why. But again, it's not an if, an either or, it's a what all can we do. And then I did want to just give, if I could, just give a little bit of a shout out to our superintendent and just tell you all the things that he's been involved in, and sometimes I'm sure he just wants to wring his neck, but wring my neck maybe. But he works with the Virginia School Boards Association on the Challenging Schools board that they have going now to try to help schools in Virginia that are not as successful. He is out speaking all over the country about parent engagement. He encourages members of his staff to do the same thing, to participate in a lot of programs. So this school division is working very hard to not only go out and show what we're doing well, but always in a continuous learning mode as well. And so as a school board member, I'm very appreciative of a superintendent who does that and also encourages his staff to do the same. So,
thank you. Mr. Fuentes?
Yes, and continuing with the, since we're talking about the vocational education and New Horizons, I think this whole body here is a big supporter of that. And I go back to 2007. I had a discussion with Mr. Kennedy, I recall, and it's very subject about making vocational education more accessible to our students. And I think most on this board, on these three boards, know that New Horizons, we are part owner in New Horizons, and we have the two buildings down there. One is at Fort Eustis Boulevard, and the other one down in Hampton. And over the years, some things have evolved, and a lot of the technical programs have moved down to Hampton. I don't know how much you know, but we are working to move some of those technical programs back up to the Fort Eustis campus off of Fort Eustis Boulevard. And so that's going to help with some of the travel time issues that are going on. The other, regarding the question you just asked about, and Dr. Constantino, you can correct me, and Ms. Cordasco correct me, but the CTE committee at one time, the Perkins grant every year, the CTE committee was part of approving that, and one of the requirements I thought that was part of, I thought it was a state requirement, there was a completer survey that had to be done where they go and call all the, to find out what all the completers have done. And I thought up until just recently, I don't know if it's changed with the past couple of years, but that survey is done yearly, is the way I understand it. So I think that data is available, I believe.
To some extent, it becomes difficult once a student turns 18 because we don't always have the contact information, and it's voluntary whether or not they get back with us. We can certainly supply the information with whatever they've tested when they're within our system. But as far as then finding out whether or not that translates to a job, it is something that we've talked about quite substantially in the 21st Century Career Ready committee that I'm on. And so, you know, if anybody has some wonderful ideas from that, we can do that. I mean, we would like to know, you know, are people staying in college? Are they finishing college? In fact, you know, one of the big surprise that we experienced when we had Manufacturing Day this year was that we went to one of the companies and found that we had a Jamestown High School graduate who had gone on to Virginia Tech to become an engineer, had come back and was, unbeknownst to us, informally mentoring other students within our system to talk with them about her experience in the education system. So it is a challenge just based on federal guidelines in terms of privacy issues, but you know, certainly I think we could maybe be a little bit more robust in seeking it, voluntary participation.
Well, and I wasn't referring to the college portion of it, it was the vocational portion, or it's really not even, I mean, it's not called that anymore, but the career and technical completers.
Right. We can find out what they do within our system, but then whether or not that translates into a job, we may or may not know that.
I know that New Horizons struggles with the same data, trying to capture the data of how successful the completers are. So but it's a point well taken.
There are organizations that do that at the National School Boards Association convention. There are a whole host of groups of people that will do that because it would take, you either build that into your system and pay for it with internally, but they don't necessarily have the skills to do that follow-up. And so that's why these organizations are out there. And they're, you know, you have to pay for that service, and we just haven't had the luxury of doing that. And that's the piece, because I've been very much interested in that. And that's just the piece of the component that would really be nice to be able to measure how effectively we are in our educational system generally, is finding out what's happening to the career technical educational people when they finish those programs, and also when they finish their four-year degree, or if they finish their four-year degree at the schools. That's a nice bunch of data that I'd like to see. But I talk to these people all the time, but
Mr. Foster?
While we're on the theme of additional data, I really like the bottom half of this 8.5 by 11, where it parses out our graduation between the high schools. It'd be really helpful to see this data over time, and if possible, I don't know if we can pull that data from our peer schools, but see that data from those institutions as well.
Good.
Mr. Hibb?
Yes, I know, going back to what we called years ago VOTEC, I was in class that started at the North Campus when it was built in '78, graduated through that, and have held that same career through my entire life. So it is a program that works. And, but gathering that data, I was on the executive committee for them down there, and gathering that data and that sort of thing was always a tough thing to do, because people kind of, they just moved into different areas and trying to, you know, unless they really call back or you have a number, you kind of lose those people. So it's very tough, but it's a good program. I had a lot of the students from the program that worked for me and would come back to my company and work, and you know, till they graduated, and some of them stayed on, some of them went on to other careers. So it's and it was nice when it was in the North Campus, because at that time we had 6 periods. So you went on the first 4 periods and you went there, and then you came back and you finished your last 2 periods at the end of the day. So, but we had, I think, a little bit more buses, a little few people, and easier to manage at that time. But, so yeah, horses.
I'm sorry.
That's why you're ahead.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to wrap this up here, as we're a little over schedule. Call my own number first. Mr. Onizek had some great questions about efficiencies and asking our teachers to do more with less. And for me, those are really kind of unique. The majority of our cost is people. And, you know, that's, as was put on the board before, people is where it's at. And if we're honest with our citizens and we're honest with our teachers, we are asking them to do more. You know, the state has funding us at 2009 levels, and we have 1,000 more students now. You know, these bodies, the localities have done wonders in trying to make up that gap, but we're still not there. So if we look at the unfunded mandates, the testing, reporting, non-classroom type requirements on our teachers and our staff, that's all there. And so are we asking our teachers to do more? I think if we are honest with ourselves, we would definitely say that we are. So, you know, those are good questions. And then if we look at our changing environment, our changing student population, our changing demographic, you know, the English language learners, the special needs students, those are all students that require more resources and putting more demands on what is already our limited resources. But I want to thank everyone for their support here today. I want to thank everyone for their contributions and their participation. I think we had great discussion. As we put out there, we have our successes. Our successes do not happen by accident. It's a lot of work that goes into putting us where we are. Our teachers, our leadership in planning and professional development, and in classroom delivery. The successes that you see in that video, they happen in every classroom, in every student, in every building in WJCC, and that's something we can be proud of. On the other hand, we have our challenges. We understand that. We have identified our challenges. We are confident that we have the right leadership in place to meet those challenges, both in the administration, in our buildings. But to Mr. Hippel's point, we have the right teachers in the classroom to do that. We have excellent classroom teachers. They are engaged. They care about our students. As a community, we have a school system that we can be proud of. It reflects well in our communities and reflects well in our community's values and our priorities. And so I appreciate all of your interest and participation in our school system. So, Mr. Chairman Hippel, you want to take your board out?
Yes, I certainly will. And I have a motion for adjournment to the 4 p.m. March 24th, 2015 work session.
So moved.
Ms. Hill, would you call roll?
Sure. Ms. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Onizek?
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy?
Aye.
And Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Got to remember that sequence.
Mayor Hallman, you want to take your counsel off?
I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Ms. Miller.
Ms. Newton?
Aye.
Mr. Pond?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Chair Feiler?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Without objection, this meeting, the Williamsburg James City County School Board is adjourned. Thank you.
She's smarter than you. She's got to read.